and you can actually watch the whole webinar on YouTube under ICC Media, probably in a couple of weeks. And we do have time or allocated some time at the end for questions and discussions. And by default, all audience members are muted and with videos off. And if you have a question, please use the Q&A function at any time to submit questions, or you can indicate your interest in being recognized. And then we can unmute you, and then you can ask your questions during the Q&A section at the very end. Next slide, please. So most of the panelists today, including myself, are on the executive committee of the Global Membership Council. Judy Zakareski is the West President of Global Services for the International Code Council, who is behind the scene today. And Judy will provide an overview of the services provided by the Global Membership Council. Judy, please.
Thank you very much, Rock, and thank you all for joining us today. The Global Membership Council is one of the 6 membership councils that is sponsored by the International Code Council. It is meant for international members of the ICC, as well as for US-based members who are interested in global building safety issues. Membership in the ICC is not required to become a member of the Global Membership Council. It appears that we're having some issues with the sound. I'm sorry to pause, but Lynn, our tech support, is on, and perhaps she can help us to see what is happening with the sound, because I'm able to hear Rock. Are you able to hear me, Rock?
Yes, I can hear loud and clear.
Yes, I can hear you too, Judy, as well.
Okay, so the people who are, so other people are having no problem with the sound. So those of you who are having problem with the sound, it might be a setting on your computer. Sorry to pause there. But membership in the ICC is not required to be a member of the Global Membership Council. I've put a link at the bottom of this website. If you are interested in joining, please do so. We have a lot of new initiatives planned for 2022, including a lot of effort to get members more engaged in the work of the Global Membership Council. We're planning to stand up several working groups to also talk about enhancing the value of ICC involvement for members outside the United States, particularly those who are not using the I-codes. There's still great value in the networking opportunities that are available. So thank you all for joining the webinar. We will continue this webinar series into 2022. Hope that a lot of you can join us for those webinars. Information will be posted in the new year about those. And all of the governing committees for 2022 have already been scheduled. You can sign up and register for those on this same website. Thank you, Rock, for that opportunity. And my email address is included at the end of this presentation. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Judy. So special shout out to our overseas audiences. So far, we have over 110 audiences. So, when it comes to building safety, I think, we all speak the same language. So we'd love to hear from overseas members. And we have established a forum on the Global Membership Council website, or you can email Judy, and we're here to help. So next slide, please. And here's an overview of today's discussion. The focus of the webinar, it's basically on emerging technologies and some challenges we're facing in the building industry. So we will touch base on emerging technologies in different areas, building design, green and sustainability, fire and life safety. Lastly, challenges in code enforcement and regulatory conformity. Next slide, please. So today's panelists have a very diverse background in the building industry, ranging from architecture fire protection, life safety, green and sustainability, and everything else. So let me start with Ashley Delgado. Ashley is the current president of the DC Code Official Association, a local chapter of the ICC. She's a residential energy plan reviewer for the DC government. She is a certified building performance professional with the Building Performance Institute, ICC Residential Energy Inspector Plan Reviewer, and USGBC Lead Green Associate. Next is Dr. Maurice Nawaba. Dr. Nawaba has over 30 years of experience in public and private planning, infrastructure development, design, and construction in the USA and abroad. Dr. Nawaba is a practicing architect, planner, and construction specification writer. He is a principal at Chiki, Maurice and Associates, an architecture planning and project management firm. He is also a member of the International Code Council Global Membership Council and the State of Maryland Strategic Energy Investment Advisory Board, among other boards and commissions. And lastly, Neville Pereira. Neville is currently the Deputy Director at the Department of Building Inspection for the City and County of San Francisco. As a registered professional engineer in the state of California, he has spent past 30 plus years of his career facilitating construction as a design engineer and city or county official. He is also currently ICC certified as a building code official, plant examiner, building inspector, and accessibility specialist. Lastly, myself, I'm a fire protection engineer based in Washington, D.C. area. I practice fire protection and life safety consultant.
I hope everyone can hear me. My name is Ashley Delgado. Thanks, Rock, for the introduction. I wore many hats working for DC government under their Department of Consumer Regulatory Affairs. So I've had the chance to explore affordable housing, commercial and residential buildings. So, and here are a few challenges I've came across wearing those many hats, and a couple of projects that that my team pretty much tried to, not try to, but we've succeeded in getting permits for. And I would like to present those challenges to you, and also as code enforcers for working for government entities or organizations, to keep an open mind on, you know, on the progress of these projects. So we're going to talk about the clean energy and sustainable technologies, particularly around these two projects. Next slide, please. So currently, DC is trying to forge a path for net zero energy buildings and construction. That includes from everything from materials to the actual end product of having these buildings run or operate. So I like to call this a tale of two buildings. The first one's called Cycle House. It's the next generation affordable housing net zero building, and it's currently under construction, and it takes about I would say about a quarter block of this particular street on North Capitol Street, and it's from 1520 to 1522 on the corner of Capitol and I think 14th. Not really sure, but that's not the point. The point is that that particular building is under affordable housing, and there was a lot of I would say collaboration that had to go between the building code officials, ourselves, and 3 project teams that had to make sure that this building at the end of operation will succeed in being a net zero energy building. And when I say net zero energy building, I'm pretty much referring to a definition that means a building that does not consume as the energy that the more energy than it needs. And let me explain. Give me a moment because I had my definition right out in front of me and it went away. Apologies. Yes. So when I say net energy, it means the total amount of energy a building uses yearly is equal to or less than the amount of energy created on site by innovative technology or renewable power generation. So that's when I say net zero, that is exactly I mean that definition alone, because I know a lot of folks have different definitions, and we had to determine what net zero energy means for us as code officials when we review projects. And trust me, we had a lot of discussions on this. So the Cycle House project, which is the one you see on the top right above, that was done by Urban Green LLC, Flywheel Development, and Studio Upwall Architects, which are all local designers and developers. And to go into the project summary of that particular building, it's 4 stories, mixed-use building, 15,000 square feet, 15 rental apartments, a mix of 1-bedroom and studio units. The first floor is a restaurant and a community serving retail space. It's long-term affordable workforce housing for persons at about 50 to 60% of the median income in the city. It targets bicycle, mass transit, and pedestrian-oriented residents. So it has a variety of transportation options. And it has also a variety of net zero energy building features, including renewable energy, low CO2 emissions, and zero stormwater runoff design. And so let's get into the green focus of Cycle House. So at the time when they presented this project, we already had energy codes in place. But the issue is that their particular materials, method, and designs weren't exactly what code officials were familiar with. So it was a bit of a challenge to kind of educate everyone what that meant. So and we had to meet with other agencies to also understand what on-site solar would look like, what off-site solar would look like, what cogeneration fuel cells look like. So that project, even though we had codes that encouraged it, it just wasn't clearly defined on what that meant for that site. So for instance, this Cycle House basically is LEED Gold certified, which is great. But at the same time, they were going to generate 100% of its energy on site. So what does that mean? Is it rooftop? Is it like, ground level? So they decided to use rooftop solar in combination with fuel cells for cogeneration for heat and power. And they also use environmentally friendly materials to build the building. They also went for a high performance thermal envelope and energy efficiency lighting, plug loads, and appliances. And they also built in an off-grid capable off-grid. The site is also off-grid capable for maximum performance. And they also we also kind of got together and agreed that that it can also be powered from a community solar project, like a farm, a solar farm. So that's just a couple of challenges for that building, but we came to an agreement on like what can be done, and what would constitute that building as a net zero building. As far as the building below, that's the American Geophysical Union building. And this is a historic building. So again, we had to have a lot of talk with other agencies like historic and Office of Planning, Department of Energy and the Environment. So, and as well as the developers and the contractors and the architects. So we've had many meetings with these guys because it's a historic building and it's a huge renovation. So a lot of the design principles were not very familiar to us. These guys, they did solar panels, more than 700 photovoltaic panels at the site to generate the power needed to make it a net zero building. They also did a hydronic cooling system to maintain the temperature within the building itself, and also circulating chilled water through a network of pipes instead of ceiling panels. They have green wall systems and throughout the interior of the building, as well as green roofs, to keep just for to reduce the energy loads of the building. They use direct current power. They also had a high performance envelope installation. They have water cisterns for reclamation, and they also, and this is an interesting bit, use a sewer heat exchanger in an old sewer that's right below the building, to cut down on the energy needed to heat and cool the building. So, which was again never done in the city. This sewer heat exchanger, this system is pretty much the first of its kind in North America, and it taps into DC's municipal wastewater system to create a heat exchange. The main purpose of this sewer heat exchanger is to transfer heat acquired inside the building during cool season, and when the conditions are right, to absorb heat from the sewer during heating season. This is a Hoover system which diverts local wastewater to an outside settling tank before recirculating it inside the AGU headquarters. So trust me, many conversations, many meetings. So those are a couple of features that kind of stand out of this huge commercial building. And then the glass that you see it's a smart glass system. It's about 929 windows, 11,227 square feet of it, of this glass that basically helps with heating and cooling the building, maintaining and adjusting. It adjusts its tint depending on the day, for lighter or darker. They do have energy efficient restrooms, where the water cistern that collects the stormwater via the green roof to be reused in restrooms. So these are the few features of these two buildings. They're both commercial in the eyes of the districts, but how they approached their construction was very different and very similar in ways. And as code officials, we have to be absolutely open-minded on how, if we want to proceed in net zero energy buildings and construction, it really does require some creative thinking and a bit of just a lot of patience. Next slide, please. And again, this is a summary of what these two buildings had in common, and what features that they aim for to create these net zero buildings. They aim for reduction, reclamation, absorption, generation, and renewable energy. And this is both on and off site. remind yourself, DC is a small city in the entirety of the US. So the space is very limited, and we can't, what I've learned is that we can't require that all sites have to have on-site solar. We have to be a bit creative on how we approach that. So we've honestly approached it where offsite solar is another way of going about it. High performance envelope, environmentally friendly materials, and a variety of options of transport, and some green features to help with energy loads. Next slide, please. And this is the clincher. because of how our local regulations are met, we had to find other ways to kind of allow a path for designers and project teams to think creatively on how they're going to meet net zero projects. So as of recently, DC came up with a clean energy plan to help with that pathway for net zero codes and buildings. Because if project teams are going to pursue this line of building constructions, we need to have some set minimums for them to proceed. Having meetings for every single individual unique project is not very effective of our time. So in partnership with all the agencies, we came up with a minimum plan. And as you can see, it's not codified in our building and construction and in our laws or in our codes. So this is our way of kind of trying to meeting in the middle with that. It's a plan. It's not a law. So it's not mandated by project teams just yet. But this is at least a plan for them to move forward if they choose to. But yes, next, I'm sorry. Next slide, please. I'm sorry. This is one of our processes. So DC has their local code development process on how we amend building and construction codes in the city. There's a group called the Construction Code Coordinating Board of the CCCB. And under the CCCB, there are tag groups that are designated to individual principles like structural, fire, residential building codes. And these guys, they meet every other month, once a month, and they're appointed by the mayor's office. And so just to give you a background, this is how our code processes are in the city. And when we initially adopted the 2012 ICC code family, we amended them to the 2013 DC DC municipality regulation, which is the local building codes. Now, projects have about a year to grandfather their projects during this period. Unfortunately, because of how the city works, it literally took us 8 years to adopt the next set of codes. So within this 8-year span, within that 8 years, project teams are creating projects, and those two projects, Cycle House and the American Geophysical Union building, were both within those 8 years, with no net zero plans or definitions, nothing. So within those 8 years, a lot of projects, not net zero wise, were moving forward, and we had nothing in place for them. So that's why we came up with the Clean Energy DC plan, and we were basically reacting to these new projects. So yes, next slide. Okay. And so what I've learned during that time, and again, as a code official, you got to be a little creative. When you see a project like that where it can change the method of construction, um, of a method, materials, or design of a construction to do better, be better, especially net zero buildings. I list this as from the least amount of work to the greatest amount of work. Alternative in both code books of the IRC, and currently DC's on the IRC family of the 2015, the alternative materials, design, and methods for both commercial and residential are the easiest methods of moving a project forward, because it's you're getting approval from the building code official and the as well as the plan reviewer. If the plan reviewer is not sure, it goes all the way up to the building code official, right? So that would be the most easiest path to move forward in creating something like a passive house. And we have a few of those projects, a passive house in the district, as well as net zero buildings. The second one is a code modification. And I put that as a link. If you click on that link will send you to DC's code modification process. The process is longer, and it's about, I would say, about 30 days, or 30 about 30 business days for you to hear anything back. And again, it goes between the building code official and the managers of that plan reviewer. So it stays within the department, the permitting department. And the longest the longest method to seek these changes, which is what a lot of people do after after they succeeded or failed in the first two, it's policy and planning versus current codes. So basically, you're going to go through the process of going to the mayor's office or going to the CCCB group, and you participate in the tag, and that can take months, years to see any changes. But that not to not to discourage, changes may or may not happen. It's a 50-50 shot, and you can take that shot if you like. But a lot of folks, after they've gone through the first two, they'll go they'll try to get it changed on a municipality wide level. Next, please. Next slide, please. I'm sorry. And that's all to say, this is after those projects, after a few, projects that are similar to that, DC came up with a DC 2.0 plan, where our commitment for net zero new buildings, net zero retrofits are now part of that plan for the city, seeing that it is possible to do major renovations and new construction for net zero buildings. And the goal is set for 2032, but for zero carbon is set for 2050. For new commercial buildings, and I want to make sure I double check, but from my knowledge, new commercial buildings are set to be net zero by 2022. So in the previous slide, I showed that that commitment is for commercial buildings, seeing that more and more commercial buildings are leaning toward net zero energy, whether it's new retrofit, and for residential is 2026. So again, when you have to start from somewhere, and code officials and regulators need to understand that you gotta be a little you gotta be open-minded to these things, because it'll change. It's not, the building industry is not going to stay the same. Next slide, please. And because of all this, the district has hired independent studies of where we are in that in our emissions to see how effective these buildings will be. And this is just a baseline energy use and emissions in DC type of chart. It was done in partnership with Department of Energy and Environment, which is a local agency of ours. And yeah, so this is some of the information we kind of gathered to see how effective these buildings will be as part of that plan. Next, please. And as code officials, we got to have more than one resources on how to, make those calls. So these are some of the resources that we've used along with the code book to make sure we understand what's being done. So not necessarily you have to follow the same framework, but these are some of the resources that myself and my colleagues have used. And we have plenty of resources and books, but yeah, these are like one of our staples to understand what it means for a building to be net zero energy. And I'm pretty much done. If you have any questions, just let us know at the end, and I hope I was informative on about our position as code officials as well as the emerging technologies in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Excellent work in DC. By the way, DC actually leads the nation in LEED certified green buildings based on square foot per capita. Actually, the first platinum LEED certified building is in DC. And next, I'm going to cover emerging technologies related to the fire protection. So next slide, please. The first I want to introduce is the fiber reinforced polymer, short for FRP. Essentially, it is a externally bonded reinforcement to provide tensile strengths equivalent to the steel. And in simple terms, it's basically a concrete repair kit, and that is easy to apply, install, and then it's lightweight. And it is a proprietary technology. I think there's only 2 companies in the nation that has the patent on this technology. So it is an assembly, and the first part, it's basically the carbon fiber. They come with thin sheets. It's in a roll. And then the next one, it's basically the epoxy adhesive. And when you apply or doing repairs in the building, so in this instance, it's a high-rise building, and they're doing rerouting of the plumbing or conduits embedded in the concrete floor. So they basically cut everything open, and then once they fill everything back up, and then this technology was introduced. And I was involved by a local structural firm. They asked me to take a look from fire and life safety perspective, to see, if that can be approved when they submitted their submittal. So obviously, when I look at it, I was not aware, there's a ICCES evaluation. So there's a couple of things I look at it. The first one, it's if the whole assembly, it's gonna impact fire resistant ratings of the building members. And secondly, if there's any fire propagation, what is the classifications for the interior material per IBC. And so I basically, do my research and look at the manufacturer's specifications. And then I discovered, actually there's a ICCES evaluation, which would just make everything so much easier. And they have done testing on structural, toxicity, fire resistance, and fire propagation. And everything is listed in the report. So, just after reviewing it, basically, we approve the submittal, and there's really no issues. And let me just kind of go over the installation process. So first, on the cutting and patching part, you basically apply epoxy first, and then you apply the carbon fiber fabric. And depending on the structural strength that required, sometimes multiple layers are required. So basically, you just do epoxy, and then you apply the carbon fiber, epoxy again, and carbon fiber until it reaches to the required thickness. And then after it's cured, and you are supposed to do special inspections. And part of it is that, you have to send the finished product. Sometime, it's usually 2 pieces, 12 by 12, and send it to a certified laboratories, and they will provide, testing results on the tensile strengths that is required. And so if the building, depending on the construction, that requires that the structural member, carries a fire rating, and then the last assembly required is actually you have to apply intumescent fire retardant coating, and that pretty much provides the required fire rating, and it's actually up to 4 hours, and then the required basically flame and smoke spread rating. And Judy, you can go to the next slide, please. So the picture to the right, it's basically showing an application process. As you can see, the installer, it's in a PPE, and he used a roller applying the epoxy. And then this picture is showing there's already a layer that's being applied. And the picture to the left, it's actually the fire proofing, the intumescent paint that's being applied. And, there's a couple issues, just kind of jump out, right? And it's white color. And the contractor actually did above and beyond. They put red stripes to it. So, but, there's no labeling. And so, after installation, and you really don't know what that is. And then, it's very possible that, since it's not protected, it's open, you can drill anchors, so it's easily get damaged. So that's a big flag. And unfortunately, that IBC currently, it doesn't really require a labeling. And, on this type of applications, I believe right now, the only labeling requirements, it's actually on partitions or walls. So, and in the past, my own experience that, if there's any fireproofing, whether it's a sprayed or, intumescent type, and if there's no labeling and then there's no good record keeping, it's really difficult to figure out, what is the thickness, what is the, manufacture, so if you want to do patching, it's extremely difficult. So I'm hoping that, I guess the code committee, if we could, again, take a look at this issue, again, in the next code cycle, that'll be great. Next slide, please. So the next one, rather than emerging technology, I want to talk about, ongoing fire protection technology. In specific, it's the FM200 or eCaro fire suppression. FM200, it's probably, you know, the largest install base of any clean agents fire extinguisher. And it is also a popular halon replacement. And the chemical composition is HFC 227. And HFCs, it has a huge global warming potential. It's a greenhouse gas. I think, you know, if you guys in the fire protection industry, you know that halon has been phased out probably about 50 years ago, you know, in the late 70s or early 80s. And halon is actually an ozone depletion agent. And so the Kakali amendment in 2016, which is to the Montreal Protocol, actually, you know, requesting a phase down, not phase out, of the HFC chemicals. And the goal set right now is reduction, you know, anywhere from 15% to 20%, you know, from 2036 and 2047. And in the U.S., it's actually became law, and it was enacted under the Innovation for the Environment of Consolidated Appropriation Act 2021, and then EPA is authorized to basically, you know, address the HFC issues, you know, to phase down. Next slide, please. So currently in the market, even though you know, the HFC or FM200s, they're still available and they're still the most popular clean agent. And the manufacturer, you know, start taking actions, and they are still continue to sell and support FM200s. So if your facility already have FM200 installed, and that's not going to be an issue, you know, if you need a recharge or replacement. However, for new constructions, there's a huge impact on price. And just last month, FM200, you know, per the agent per pound price, it's already double. So I suppose, you know, it's just another way, you know, try to face down FM200s. And there's actually some alternatives. And I think that the closest, it's Novak 1230. Novak 1230, it's a HFC. You know, it's again a it's actually hydrofluorocarbon, and I guess the positive on that, it's actually a greenhouse friendly agent. And obviously, comparing to FM200, it does require a higher pressure to discharge, and then a larger footprint as far as its on agents. But you know, it's definitely a greenhouse friendly agent. And other two options are inner gas. Inner gas is just, you know, a combination of inner gases, and the left picture is basically showing that it requires a huge footprint, and then the pressure discharge it's a lot higher. And lastly, it's water mist. Water mist is basically a new technology, and that used high pressure. And then when the water discharged from the nozzle, you know, it's basically a mist. And, you know, it's definitely environmentally friendly, and then it can protect certain properties. Next slide, please. So let me touch on, I think Ashley already touched base on, you know, there are some challenges or issues regarding new technologies. And obviously, you know, I think the biggest challenge we're facing is that new technology that's always outpacing building code regulations. And we all know that building cycles, you know, every 3 years or 4 years. But however, innovations, new technology, basically, it's just coming up to the market every day. The building codes, it's, if we're strictly applied the prescriptive codes, and it's definitely slowed down the innovation, and then it could be costly to the customers. So as far as compliances, and my experience that I think the first reaction from HJ is that, hey, let's just reject this, and then just have the customer kind of figure out a way that to present it. And I think the most popular solution is performance based. And the interesting point that so currently in the international building codes, it's only in the first chapter. I mean, there's one section verbiage is dealing with the performance based. It's alternative material design and methods of construction, and the building code official, has the final say. And then that data and testing must be submitted for supporting. And some jurisdictions, and I just look at the Virginia state wide building codes, they actually remove that section. This little verbiage, it's entirely removed from their building codes. And however, among the I codes, and ICC does have a standard or code. It's called ICC Performance Code for building and facilities. Unfortunately, this was developed, I think, between 2016. And currently, I don't believe there's any jurisdiction ever adopted. And there's really very few revisions to that. So this year, internally, ICC, it's working on revamp this performance-based code. And what they're trying to do is, rather than focus on life safety and structural, and they want to make it, all-rounded, applies to all disciplines. And then most importantly, that, they want to make it friendly to HJs. So if, the audiences are interested, you guys want to contribute, and there's a web page set up dedicated for that. I think the email address is performance@ccsafe.org, or you can email Judy, and she can get you in touch of the people that, it's working on that. And then in February, there's going to be a roundtable that is open for everybody. So if you guys are interested to contribute. So I guess the next two methods, it's engineer analysis or code modification. And, based on my own experience, is that, as a professional engineer, we have to provide a base performance. What is the minimum safety, it's equivalent to the prescriptive code requirements. And then what methods or solutions you have to provide. And the last one is evaluation services. For new products, the one I just touched based on the concrete technology, you can submit it to a certified laboratory, have them provide, the required services, and then, submit it to the building code official. I think that's another way. But I mean, neither one of the methods that requires time and cost. So, and then the experience, I'm sure everybody has a different experience in different jurisdictions. So, I've had the same project approved, the same modification approved, in 2 other states. And then, comes to a third jurisdiction, it was rejected. So it just really depending on, the person who's the building code official or who's in charge, and then, their level of comfort. And I guess next slide. So next, I'm going to turn to Neville. Neville's going to discuss approving use of emerging technologies. Neville, the stage is yours.
Hi, good day, everybody. It's good to be here. I just wanted to thank you for your participation and some great presentations there. Thank you, Rock and Ashley. So can we have the next slide? Okay. So hopefully you've understood from Ashley's presentation and Rock's that there's a lot of factors affecting the building regulatory environment, right? Agencies that either set up or not set up, but and I have them listed on the screen here. The first few of these are mostly operational. How do you staff? How do you maintain certain customer service levels, dealing with budgets and paying staff and making sure that balances with your revenues. Also code adoption. You just heard Rock talk about every 3 years we have a constantly evolving code, and incorporated with those codes are emerging trends and technologies with it. And then there's always new legislation that's coming down either from local, state, or national levels, sometimes even international levels too, as our world leaders look to impose, climate change restrictions on our nations right across the world. And then also, how do we deal with the building inventory? Aging building stock, how do we maintain those? How do we constantly keep them refreshed, and so on and so forth? The last 3 items on this thing are really dealing with some of the issues we're talking about today. Licensing certification, how do we make sure that our design professionals, our builders, our people that ensure quality of product and that kind of stuff, maintain certain standards, and then with that too, how do we maintain quality of construction in the built environment? And then the last item on here is emerging transit technologies, which is the subject of today's conversation. Next slide, please. So we're going to essentially strip off all the operational needs and think about all these things. The graphic on the right of your screen is supposedly that code official, right? That individual, or it could be a department, a board of directors, a consortium of stakeholders that are dealing with all of these influences on the built environment and how do we manage them. So I'm going to speak today in reference to how things are established in the United States, and from what I know, a lot of the established economies in the world, and also talk about how emerging economies or lower income economies, how they deal with playing on the world stage and remain competitive, and yet keep the standards that are established across the world so that they're on level footing. And I'll give you a quick example. You may have I'll use something that I'm familiar with. I had a little bit of experience with establishing codes and standards in the nation of Cambodia not too long ago. where the textile industry, kind of supported by the World Bank, was looking to establish certain standards for their manufacturing plants in that country. And in doing so, we're looking to establish some codes and standards in the nation. And this was primarily so that they could leverage resources in that country and then export that material to other countries. And in doing so, certain standards need to be established. Quality material, replicability and reliability of replication of materials and products and so on and so forth. And in doing so, in the textile industry, they have to make sure that factories are standardized as far as construction, code, safety, and so on and so forth. So in order to do that, and this is in conversation with other, lead evaluators that look to establish these codes and standards in developing economies. It's generally less expensive to set up those codes and standards within that country as opposed to going to the receiving country of those products and getting those products tested. If you're looking at, say, a line of, let's say, jean products, to make sure that it met the standards of, say, the U.S., rather than shipping the product to the U.S. and getting them tested over there, it would be a lot less expensive to evaluate them in the nation of Cambodia. So what we're looking at is what does it take to establish these codes and standards in the country where they are being, they are originating from. And so let's go to the next slide. And so here we talk about, from my research and my experience, what some of the basic needs are for in order to establish these basic standards and/or codes. And I'll start from ground zero, right, where there's essentially no building standards or no building regulatory rules. And there's basically a consensus that in order to build that economy and attract attract financing within the nation or internationally, they need to establish these building standards. And so there first needs to be this consensus internally to that country, either through the commerce agency that says, okay, look, we have a product, we have the resources, we have the labor, we just can't attract people to our country because we just can't maintain these standards. So do we as a nation or want to establish this regulatory framework in order to play on the world stage? And so there has to be that need first, and general consensus in the community, whether it's the building community or the textile community or whatever, that yes, we want to play. And so let's get together and establish these things. And then once that consensus is needed, to be able to go to the stakeholders, whether it's local government, maybe it's the design community, the architects, engineers, or it could be the builders that say, hey, look, we want to participate. We're in at the ground floor. We want to establish these standards. We want to play by these rules. Or it could be even finance organizations like the World Bank is kind of known for stepping in and encouraging local economies to get organized and get standardized, and establish these frameworks that we're talking about. So once you have that consensus, then you establish who the stakeholders are, and then begin to create or form these organizations that are then going to take the lead on standardization, evaluation of products, and so on and so forth. We saw this, like I said, when I went through the exercise of establishing some standards in a developing nation. At the time, it appeared that government wasn't ready to get into this arena, and so what we found that we immediately started looking at where that consensus and where that's the stakeholder initiative was, and looking there first. And we actually found it in the design community with the Engineers and Architects Association, as well as in academia. The engineering professors and so on and so forth were excited to get engaged in establishing these minimum standards for construction and products and so forth. So when Ashley was talking about, she talked about what DC needed to put that framework together. She, in her jurisdiction, she got the local government, the mayor's office, to establish this clean energy plan and get the rest of that jurisdiction to buy in on it. They chose a LEED certification as a standard to follow, and they were quickly going towards this net zero concept. And in her talk, she talked about the fact that none of those at the beginning were codified. There was a minimum plan, but it wasn't put into law. And so she talked a little bit about how that started to evolve and become more like law, and eventually probably will become law if it's not already there. Likewise, Rock talked about that in his presentation about how as these new products were coming on the market, there wasn't any labeling, there wasn't any standardization, and how do you get that out there? How do you get the industry to look and say, look, we want this product, it's effective, it shows that it works, and we want to be able to now encourage manufacturers to produce it, but then create a standardized way of measuring its effectiveness across the board. And as you build these critical masses of stakeholders and consensus, then the organizations start to form. Right? Ashley talked about it. Started with the mayor's office creating a group. Then you form a third party, potentially a third party organization that comes in and evaluates other, say five players in the market. In Ashley's case, maybe it's five energy consultants that they want to be able to make sure all these energy consultants, when they establish a performance index of net zero, that they're just net zero for one and two organizations matches 3, 4, and 5 organizations as well. And so what is that standardization here in the US and across the world? That process is called accreditation, and actually certification and licensing too, right? These bodies are third-party organizations that go into an industry and establish these standards and make sure that they're all within the general thresholds of calibration or of measurement, so we can all use the same units of measurement to be able to come up with a standard. We are well familiar here in the U.S. with the evaluation service. So all of these emerging products that Rock and Ashley talked about generally go through third-party testing, and they have tested according to certain standards that are either national standards or they're sometimes created specific for certain types of products. And then those third-party evaluators or certifiers then endorse that product, and their report then tells the building official, the code official, that product meets the minimum standards of fire life safety and/or code, and it is then able to be accepted within that jurisdiction. That's the only way that our building officials in this country are able to function and keep the regulatory framework and operations afloat, and have these other agencies take care of the details, the testing, and the evaluation. And that really, because of the success of that topology, if it were, of third-party testing and evaluation, I honestly believe that it is the way that emerging economies can work to get off the ground, on a smaller scale, get local consensus, build the organization, establish third-party evaluation, and then slowly start to get affiliated with other organizations, either local, regional, or national, or international organizations, to be able to sponsor that standardization. So with that, I'm going to ask Rock, do I still have time, or are we going?
Yeah, you have 10 minutes. Yeah.
I have 10 minutes more?
Yep.
Okay, good. And so, okay, so here in the U.S., the International Code Council has, and you heard Judy Zakreski talk about this earlier on, has partnered with other organizations to essentially assist the code official and the building community on getting the best product out as quickly as possible, with as little additional resources at the local level. And I'll explain that in a minute. The International Code Council is partnered with the International Accreditation Service, as well as the Evaluation Service, which are sister agencies under the ICC umbrella that essentially work on third-party testing and evaluation of products, as far as the evaluation service is concerned. And the accreditation looks at accrediting other agencies for either special inspection. They actually credit building departments, metal building manufacturers, basically any organization that needs standardization in order to become more present on the national, local, or international playing field. And it actually works well. As a local building official myself, I rely heavily on the ability to just go online almost on a weekly basis as products are being specified on plans, and I need to know whether they are they meet the minimum code standards. Just to do a quick search on the ICC evaluation service, there may be other evaluation services that I may tap into as well, just to get that information immediately without having to stop, study something specialized every time something specialized comes in front of me on the plans, me or my staff. As both Ashley and Rock mentioned, the world seems to be increasing in pace as it constantly evolves, and technology and the building sciences are changing right along with that, at the same pace. And it really becomes unmanageable without these third-party organizations to be able to facilitate review and approval of building systems. So with that, I'm going to stop. And Rock, are we ready to go with
Yep.
questions
for the presentation?
Okay.
So excellent on summarization on regulatory conformity dealing with emerging technologies. I believe personally that that the framework is definitely established. Whether it's adopted by building codes or not. As professionals, I think we all know exactly what needs to be done. Maybe by different methods, different processes. You need to go through testing, engineering analysis, code modification. But again, I think the bottom line is that, to ensure building safety, we just really have to go through this process. And I'm hoping that, in the future, if this ICC performance-based code, can be developed, more maturely, it's easier for us to follow. But for now, I think, I'm really comfortable that, we have a good framework. So next, it's our question discussion session. I think so far we only have one question from Martha Schrader. This question is to Ashley. Ashley, if you can unmute. Were either of the buildings certified as net zero energy LEED or others? And is DC planning to require any third-party certification for net zero?
Yeah, so just a bit of backstory. DC adopted energy codes back, I would say back in 2012, and or at least a little bit before that. There was a plan established in 2006 for DC to be a greener, healthier city, but the plan itself was very vague and left a lot of interpretation. But it was still forward thinking, and it was still established, and it led to the adoption of energy codes. So that being said, LEED was involved in the beginning, and at the time, LEED was the only pathway that was established on a law level, but that was only aimed for affordable housing and for district financed or owned buildings. Fast forward to now, where there are, there's more than USGBC, right? There's LEED, there's Passive House, there is all these green third-party certifications out there that they're pretty much are similar. You got the International Living Building Challenge that are out there that are either equal or better to each other. And that being said, with those two projects, because at the time of of their project, there was only one path in the code, which is LEED. And so both projects aim for LEED Gold. I'm not LEED Gold, I'm sorry. Cycle House is LEED Gold certified. The American Geophysical Union building is LEED Platinum. And USGBC themselves did not have a LEED Zero program guide during that time. And these projects were back in 2016 and 2018. LEED came out after these projects were certified. LEED came out afterwards in 2019, published a LEED Zero program guide. So now projects that are designed post 2019 of November, they now have LEED Zero program guides and different LEED net zero categories to go for. So there's net zero carbon, net zero water, net zero energy. And that being said, like, this is what I was talking about in the beginning, and going back to what Neville said, the building industry is constantly evolving. We started out with LEED back in 2006, and now we're here in 2020. I'm sorry, 2021. 2021. And we have Passive House, LEED, International, the Living Building Challenge, BREEAM. We have all these other green third parties that are also coming out of the woodwork with net zero programs and guides. So as code officials, we have to be able to come to the table and be open-minded about these programs, and be not not just open-minded, but also be careful to make sure that it aligns with the goals of the jurisdiction you work in. So right now, DC has their own net zero path that actually includes certain certifications from these green third parties. We have residential projects that are aiming for passive house and not LEED. Or some of these projects can easily go for LEED and passive house at the same time. We have projects that go for multiple certifications. So that, to answer your question, yes, the city is aiming for net zero energy, net zero carbon, net zero water. But there's nothing in our regulations or laws to state an actual pathway. We have to develop them as they come. So which I'm looking forward to. I'm always excited about new and challenging projects like that. So yeah, and this is a new field for a lot of folks in the building industry. And so much so the city actually is supporting green contractors. So if you are a practicing green contractor, meaning sustainable developer, you can come into DC and then and become certified. I mean, it's not that easy as I state, but you come in, get certified by the city as a practicing sustainable developer, contractor, architect, and do your thing in the city.
So if I can follow up on that, Rock. So it became clear as Ashley was talking, in all these different programs that are evolving and changing with time, and new programs kind of leapfrog over each other. It becomes almost a legislative nightmare, and what ship to jump onto, and is, strategically, is it the best thing for the community? I believe that there was a question in the chat that a lot of these initiatives, especially with energy and probably fire protection as well, come at a cost to the builder. These I know when LEED first started and people were looking at sustainable design, LEED was in my jurisdiction at the time, where I was with the city of Pasadena, was really something just for the elite, and it was elective and mostly imposed on government buildings and so on and so forth, because it was deemed that it was cost prohibitive for the general the general building industry. But as time has gone on and more vendors and more participation has been garnered in the industry for products and technologies and stuff like that, costs have gone down. They're not at a point where they're equivalent to conventional construction, but they have gone down. So in answering the question in the chat here, how do we reconcile the pushback from the community about additional costs on the building industry? Usually, when legislation goes into effect, it's an open process. At least here in the United States, for most governments, legislation is not usually enacted without public participation. You have the opportunity to direct or sway the decisions that are made. They are some big players in the industry that tend to sway the decisions of elected officials more than others. Either through lobbying or funding or whatever, and that's something that we as the community that builds this consensus of which direction to go can only we can only get involved in to help counteract you know, the larger influences on this thing. But you know, as Ashley was talking there, it also, you know, I want to keep this on a global scale, right? Because we tend to talk about how it is here in the United States and in the higher economies of the world. I also want to make sure that we understand that there is a tremendous potential in emerging economies that just really have to pick their standards. You know, out of the 10 flavors that Ashley just offered, sometimes even sustainability is not even on their radar just because they just want to get building under construction. And yeah, it may be, it may not be sustainable construction. They just need to have a coordinated and standardized way of constructing. And much like us, sustainability came way after, right? The standardization of construction in general, which is why I believe, you know, organizations like USGBC, ICC, in developing their sustainability code and energy code, should also leave it open for some of these emerging economies to be able to just jump on board and get some basic direction at a low end.
Thank you, Neville. So we only have a few minutes left. One last question, and then we're going to close this webinar. And I think Ashley, just follow up on your presentation. Were those two buildings designed primarily prescriptive based or performance based? And did you use the performance codes or chapter 3 and 4 of the IBC? You want me to repeat that, Ashley?
No, I got it. So both of those projects were beyond the code book itself. So the mindset that my colleagues and I took was like, okay, if they met the minimum of IBC, then they were already good to begin with. And then when they took it a step further, with high performance, the high performance envelope, that's usually a performance based decision. And because performance based during the code requirement at the time did not, it stated the minimum and they went beyond that. So let me go back and say that net zero is a beyond code requirement. Is not a requirement for the code. The code itself is a minimum. It's the minimum standards to build a building. When you go beyond that, everything else is pretty much, I don't want to say gravy, but everything else is pretty much like, okay, they met all the minimums. But to truly define something like net zero energy, you have to start from an agreement definition of what that means and what that looks like for it to be truly net zero. And so that's where we kind of stated, okay, we need both a prescriptive and a performance-based net zero energy. And part of that DC code process, the CCCB, is basically a volunteer group of both public and private sectors getting together and defining what that means. So to answer that question, it was definitely Cycle House was prescriptive, where the American AGU building was performance, but they both went beyond the IBC book itself because those are minimum standards, and these guys went beyond that. And that, I mean, once if a project meets the minimum, all as a code official, we need to be able to say, okay, they met everything that is required by the minimum. What else are they doing, to to make this a high performance building that it is? And that's where the curiosity kind of, as a code official, gets me. It's like, okay, so you're saying this is a net zero building. What are you calling this a net zero building? And and one of the the question then comes back to me as a code official. Okay, how do you define it as a net zero building? And that's where I'm like, oh, we really need to take this higher than me then, because I don't want to define it and then come to find out I'm wrong, or there's a disagreement amongst my colleagues. So yeah, those types of projects, until you define it, it's performance based. And once you define it, then you can kind of separate prescriptive versus performance. Does that make sense?
Great, Ashley. I think we're pretty much at the end of the webinar. Again, I want to thank everybody for attending, especially panelists. Thank you for all your hard work, and I want to wish everybody a safe and healthy holiday season. All right. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.